Another step that I suggest taking is that the United States explore new avenues of approach to the question of communist China. World peace, as President Kennedy said in 1963, does not require that each man love his neighbor. The rulers of China may be persuaded that their long-run interest, like that of the United States and all other nations, lies not in the spread of nuclear weapons, but in their strict control. We now engage in regular discussions with the Chinese ambassador in Warsaw. But these are not the only means to explore possible Chinese accession to a system of nuclear control. We should, I believe, at the outset, invite the Chinese to participate in the disarmament talks at Geneva when those talks resume in January. If they accept, the negotiations will be more meaningful, for they will then include all of the nuclear powers. If the Chinese refuse, we will have lost nothing. We will have opened another door to peace, and the Chinese will show to the world that they are not interested.
On the second page where you...
For we were the first to discover and use the atom's secrets. Our nuclear capability is still the most powerful among the nations of the world. The greatest power brings the greatest responsibility. A responsibility, in my judgment, to engage in a total effort to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, an effort that should pervade every aspect of our foreign policy. If we have a decision to make, we must ask ourselves what effect this will have on the spread of nuclear weapons. If we have an asset with which to bargain, we must ask ourselves, in what way can this asset be used to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons? For prevention of nuclear spread is a matter of political action on a grand scale, an effort to turn the world community away from nuclear war, away from ultimate weapons as guarantors of security and prestige. In this effort, we will be called upon to use all of the weapons at our command. We will need to reach agreement on a treaty to prevent a nuclear spread. We will need to make that treaty more than a scrap of paper, to persuade other nations that it is in their direct interest to accede to and abide by it, to abstain from nuclear weapons development. We will need to ban nuclear weapons entirely from certain areas of the world. We will need to extend the limited test ban treaty to underground tests, and we will need to enlist the help of the United Nations and all other nations, including Communist China itself, in the effort to spread. Can I do that last one again? And we will need to enlist the help of the United Nations and all other nations, including Communist China, in the effort to prevent nuclear catastrophe.
Senator, I wonder if we asked you to do that last one. I mean, just the lens change so they can cut it a little bit easier, please. You ready, man?
And we will need to enlist the help of the United Nations and all other nations, including Communist China, in the effort to prevent nuclear catastrophe.
Could you, on your part 5 over here, where you
China has expressed on many occasions, of which Minister Lin Biao's recent article was only the latest, hostility toward us, expectation of protracted conflict with us, and interest in our humiliation and destruction. But despite China's hostility, it may be possible to arrive at agreements, definite and limited in nature, which are in the interests of both of us. We now engage in regular discussions with the Chinese ambassador in Warsaw. But these are not the only possible means to explore possible China.
Sure, let's start that last sentence.
We now engage in.
You want me to start? We now engage in? We got through that. How about, but these are not the only possible.
It'd be better to back it up a little.
All right. Fine. We now engage in regular discussions with the Chinese ambassador in Warsaw. But these are not the only means to explore possible Chinese accession to a system of nuclear control. We should, at the outset, invite the Chinese to participate in disarmament talks at Geneva when those talks resume in January. If they accept, the negotiations will be more meaningful, for they will then include all of the nuclear powers. If the Chinese refuse, we'll have lost. Oh gosh.
That's all right, let's do it again.
Thank you.
You know, have a regular show in the morning.
Senator Kennedy said invite the Chinese.
Is that where we did before to give us a good...
Oh, you mean where I?
Yeah, we now engage in regular discussions.
All right.
Give us a better continuity.
All right.
Ready?
States' foreign policy since 1961 will interpret our civility as a sign of weakness.
Senator, this is the second speech on this general subject you've given in the last 3 months. Have you taken it upon yourself to be the protector and the promoter of the general philosophy embodied in the Kennedy Test Ban Treaty?
No, I think that everyone is interested in that, and I don't hold myself out as just but one individual who's interested. But I think this is the most important matter that's facing all of us. I think it's more important than what is happening in Southeast Asia or what is happening in Latin America or what's happening in Berlin. And I think this is a question of whether, not only whether we're going to exist, but what's far more important, whether our children are going to have any world to hand it down to them. And we are making decisions now which not only affect our lives, but affect the lives of those who have no say in what happens. And that's our children and those who are unborn. And I think we have a responsibility to make an effort in this field and make an effort with the best talent that we have in the United States, with the best talent around the world, to try to gain control over this destructive weapon, which can destroy the whole world.
Senator, was Pope Paul's visit to the United Nations and to this country in any way influence your timing of this particular speech at this time?
Well, I've been working on the speech, as obvious from what it contains, for some period of time. I think his visit to the United Nations was a stimulus toward that organization and the nations of the world to try to control nuclear weapons and try to take some steps toward peace. And this is an effort to make some contribution to that overall
3 months ago,
struggle.
Excuse me. 3 months ago, the question was raised in an interview with you after you had given your speech that possibly you thought President Johnson was not giving the sufficient amount of time to the question of nuclear proliferation. Is that still in your mind, or was it ever in your mind?
No, I don't think anyone can give too much time or effort to this subject or to this problem. And as I say in my speech, I think President Johnson and the administration have taken some important steps over the period of the last few months. My point, however, is that we have to continue. And as we've had the brains to develop the bomb here in this country, I think that we should also have the brains to control it. And I think that requires our top talent. I think it requires as much talent and energy as we have. And I think as we put many of our top officials on finding answers and solutions to Vietnam, the same, and we put many of our top officials and scientists and engineers and scholars to developing a nuclear weapon, I think we should make the same kind of an effort to seeing what policies we could develop which would control nuclear weapons. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful because the problems are immense. But as I pointed out, as I point out in my speech, it took us 5 years before we finally arrived at a test ban treaty. Let's make the same effort with this. Otherwise, this world is going to be very fortunate to be able to survive this century. I don't believe, unless we take some steps now and take them immediately, that there is. I think there is distinct possibility that there will be very little of the Earth left at the time of the turn of the century.
Senator, you know you're going to be charged with being an appeaser of communism and Red China by suggesting that we enter into negotiations with them. What is your answer to that in advance?
Well, I think first my record speaks for itself as far as being a appeaser of Communist China. Communist China exists. We might not like it, but it exists. And they have nuclear capability. We might not like that, but it exists. And I think we better, for our own sake and for our children's sake, take cognizance of that and act accordingly. And that's what I suggest we do. Otherwise, we're just burying our heads in the sand. And I think it's self-deluding and a bad mistake.
Senator, on another subject, I don't want to...
This is all I wanted.
Okay, all right. I want to give you ample warning that...
Can I ask you about Frank Morrissey?
Yeah, exactly. How did you know?